All right, so the first vignette we'll have for you today is from Crystal Scheib, who's in anthropology and comes to us, I think, from Pennsylvania Community College, but she can correct that if I've got that wrong. So go ahead and share your screen, Crystal, and let us know what you've done.
Okay, yes. And I'm from Pennsylvania and Central Pennsylvania, and I teach as adjunct faculty virtual online courses for Harrisburg Area Community College. And what I started with is did a textbook for my anthropology, cultural anthropology course, and I want to share just a minute. I have to find my PowerPoint. But this is my book, Cultures of the World, Perspectives on Culture. And I actually used an existing, I'm sorry, this toolbar is in my way and I can't get to my PowerPoint. All right. And I actually used the Society for Anthropology and Community Colleges. Oops, I pushed the wrong button. I want to present. I used their OER textbook that they created, but I kind of like what Del was saying. It wasn't everything that I needed for my specific course. So what I went and I reviewed their book, then found other OER resources that I wanted to use to include in my textbook, but a lot of it some of it I still needed to create some content of my own. So it was it was adapting multiple resources and some creation of my own. And
Crystal, your audio is breaking up a little bit for us. Do you want to try stopping your video to see if that maybe helps a little bit?
Gladly. Again, I have to find the toolbar. Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's good.
Okay, that's good. I prefer video off anyway. So yeah, my whole purpose for doing the free textbook was to engage the students in the content and get the students to actually read the assigned chapters and make the books accessible to everyone, because I had noticed that it was pretty obvious that some of the students weren't even reading the textbook just by the questions they would email when they were asking a question. If they had read the textbook, they would have known. And in the discussion postings, I could tell by the questions they were asking or the responses that they hadn't looked at the textbooks. So my process was I reviewed the LibreTexts tutorials, identified and reviewed my potential resources, and then I created my remix map with the spreadsheet that LibreTexts provides, and then editing, a lot of editing, and then publishing the final textbook. And this is just a sample of how I was using different, I went through and I decided what I wanted to include in each chapter and which resource I was using. And then sometimes I had to actually create a section on my own original content. And I added images because a lot of times it was just text. And I think a textbook is more engaging when you have images. And I like that you can actually use videos as well. One thing I did was you can create tags on each page and it automatically creates the index. I don't know if Del went over that or not, but I really like that feature. And the definition blocks, highlight blocks, and interactive content blocks, which are templates within the editor in LibreTexts, and I use them a lot. And I like that if I find something I want to change after it's been published, I can go ahead and edit it and change something. And I believe it's updated weekly, and it's real time. So if I make a change, I don't have to wait for the next semester for it to go live. Like I said, there were chapters I needed to create. About 20%, 15 to 20% was original content, and the rest was using OER material, sometimes just as a skeleton to build on, and other chapters were I just used it direct from the Society of American Community Colleges book. I would just use a complete chapter. There was no editing necessary. A lot of the problem with that book was that each chapter was written by a different author, and so definitions weren't consistent between the chapters, and not that they were changed what that meant, but I just wanted the definitions to be consistent all the way through, and there was a lot of redundancy, so I just removed the redundancy. And my final product, which I showed at the beginning, had interactive components and definitions. And how I implemented it, because I'm an online course, is first I provided a PDF of the textbook in case they wanted to download it. And I provided a link for the students to order a hard copy if they wanted. I think maybe each semester, since I've used the textbook, maybe 1 or 2 students each semester will order a hard copy. And then I also provided the link to each chapter in the module, so they don't even have to go someplace else. It's just right in the module. When they click on it, they could just navigate right through within. We use D2L Brightspace, so it's all right within the same login. It's all accessible right there, and that I like as well. The students, we did a survey in fall 2020, and I just did another quick one last week. And basically it was pretty much everyone liked it. I offered bonus points to get them to complete the survey, because that always, an incentive always helps get a response. So most students accessed from a computer. Like I said, 1 or 2 used a print copy. But all students said they had no problems accessing it, whether it was on the computer, their tablet, or their phone. The other thing, most students strongly agreed that they liked the OER textbook over the traditional textbook, both in summer and in fall. And just sharing some positive comments. I really like the 5th comment there. I normally hate online textbooks. However, I absolutely love this one. How it was set up and made the reading simple and really gave me lots of knowledge about the content we are learning. And I think I think it's really the way you navigate in LibreTexts. It makes it really simple for the students to go through the content. And there were no negative comments. And before the OER textbook, like I said, I could tell that they were not reading the text. And there were signs, in the surveys, 85 to 90% of the students stated that they did not purchase required textbooks for a course because of the price. So that means they were, completing the course without ever having the text. And so after the OER textbook, I use Packback discussions. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but that's what I use for my discussion forums, where the students ask the questions and spark the discussions. And after I started using my OER textbook, I noticed there was a big increase on them using the content that was in the textbook. And it was sparking questions and I'd say it made them look more into the topics. And I think it's just that they were reading the textbook for a change. So that's my presentation. I don't know if you have any other questions or other things you want to see in the textbook or.
That's great, thank you. I think what we'll maybe do is go right to Laura's presentation, and then we'll have whatever time we have left at the end can be time for questions for both of you, if that works for you.
That's fine.
All right, So I'll then also introduce Laura Williamson Ambrose, who's coming to us from St. Mary's College in Indiana. And so she's going to talk about her use also. Thank you, Laura.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming me here. So what you see right here on the screen is actually just my main homepage to the courses that I teach. I thought it might be helpful in explaining who I am and how I entered into the LibreText universe. So my background actually is in early modern literature and culture. And I work in the Department of Humanistic Studies. So it's an interdisciplinary humanities department at St. Mary's College. And LibreText actually kind of came into my world from a colleague in chemistry who was just sort of talking about some really amazing things that her own students were doing and that she was doing. And I've always been involved with digital humanities work and having students create websites, and it really kind of piqued my interest. At the time, initially, I didn't think that it was anything that really intersected with the kind of work that I did, primarily because I don't use textbooks. And so I'm here as the person that doesn't actually use a textbook to talk about why this project and OER in general are so useful. The more I began to think about the problems that LibreText in particular is trying to solve, the more I realized it actually aligned very much with the kinds of things that I was doing. In particular, one of the problems that we have, particularly with pre-modern material, is that primary sources, which is the majority of what I teach, if they are on open source, they're very out of date. And the kind of prefatory material and things that are included to contextualize things for students and readers can sometimes be not only out of date, but problematic, depending on where you're getting it. So that was one thing that I thought could actually align with my own mission as a teacher. Also, only certain primary sources are available, right? Like the sort of big, great books. And I teach those, but I also teach less canonical or less widely read material. So it gave me a lot of power to give the students the kinds of material that we use in class. The other thing, and this is, I think, the important context to how LibreText allowed me to solve my own problem. While I don't use textbooks, I do use expensive primary source materials that have critical introductions. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was to tackle essentially some of those materials for students and make it a little bit more accessible. And so what I do is basically create, and here you should see my kind of main LibreText page, where what the students and I have done together is essentially create primary source critical editions. And so some of those are featured here. So that's just kind of an overview of what we've done. I wanted to walk you through a couple of pages from some of the books essentially that we've created. The first one that we did was with Macbeth. We did Macbeth because it felt like a great pilot. It actually was not something that I taught in class. I hired a couple of student researchers just to kind of get our feet wet and see what would be involved in a project like this. Because Shakespeare is in many ways extremely accessible, right? It's everywhere in the world, and yet there's something very inaccessible about Shakespeare, depending on what material or what knowledge you might have beforehand. So what I'm showing you here is one part of what we produced. So anyone can find the text of a Shakespearean play online, right? That's not necessarily the contribution. The contribution for us is all of the other stuff that a book would contain. So students and I wrote introductions or critical introductions. We annotated the primary source material itself, which you can see here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the students in groups, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit as well, created critical context essays, essentially elements of history or literary analysis that would benefit another reader in coming across this material. One of the things that was really great in working with Delmar and others is I presented them with a problem, which is that I needed LibreText to have line numbers. And so literally within hours, it was produced for me. And so this is one example of that. The other element here is that I relied on hypothesis and the way that that integrated well with LibreText. So I have to just move my Zoom thing here for a moment. With the annotation sidebar, those of you who are familiar with hypothesis will recognize this, but essentially what the students were able to do is, just highlight sections of the text as a footnote would function in a print text and work from there. So that was a great opportunity. Once we did that pilot, I actually brought it into my course as a way for students to read it. So this is an example of a book that I created over the summer without student work initially, to provide a very underread but hugely significant 16th century text to my students called Acts and Monuments, which those of you who are in the humanities world might know it as the Book of Martyrs. Pretty much second to the Bible, it was the most significant text in early modern England. And so this book can be expensive, it can be hard to access, and it certainly has elements of being impenetrably difficult. And so what we did is I had the students read it online, and you can go more online if you would like to look at the text here. And then I had them produce cultural context essays, which eventually actually then the next semester became what I used for a different set of students. And you can see some of those here. So the next time I taught it, I basically, like Delmar was mentioning earlier, I didn't initially put it up online. I used Google Docs. I was very hesitant to publish this until it was done. But this is basically what the students wrote. And then I went through and gave it some headings and some images, as Crystal was saying earlier, to give it some level of engagement. And the students were then responsible for explaining to future students who the heck even wrote this thing, because it's very complicated. There are many voices of authorship and printing involved here. This is an example of what we call a closer look or a cultural context essay. The students at the time were really interested in gender and religion, and so they engaged with contemporary scholars as well as primary source materials from the 16th century to think through why this thing even matters and why I'm forcing them to read it. Lastly, and this is my less finished section, this is the text that's in progress. So Thomas More's Utopia. The next time I taught the course, the students all divided into separate groups, and knowing full well what LibreText was, because they had consumed the Acts and Monuments online, they went about the process of writing their own cultural context essays and sections of the introduction for Utopia. I will also say this was during COVID. So it was both a unique opportunity and presented challenges for us that I hadn't anticipated previously. The class was taught as a hybrid. I did that just in case we went emergency online, which we had all experienced at some point previously, but we ended up staying hybrid. So there were pros and cons that I'm happy to talk about with that. And I will say the sort of next process for the summer and into the fall is to get this looking like some of the others. I have some student workers helping me to merge the many different student voices from the course and to produce a text just like the other two. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. We've got a few minutes for questions. Let me first just say that Laura mentioned using a hypothesis, and there'll be a little bit more information on that platform specifically during one of the vignettes coming up tomorrow afternoon or Wednesday afternoon. So if there are questions for Laura or Crystal, so you can both be here, please go ahead and put them in the chat or unmute yourself and just shout it out.
There are 3 questions in the chat.
Yeah. So I see Frank asked a question, and so Frank, your question is a real question, right? No textbook. How did you get your course approved by Curriculum and Instruction Committee? But I also detect some satire. So yeah, I mean, no textbooks. All we use are primary source materials. And I will say, so I'm a literature professor by training and by trade. But I have the benefit of working in an interdisciplinary department. So our students actually take courses in my literature class at the same time that they're taking a class in cultural history. So one of my colleagues, Jesselyn Bird, has also produced material for LibreText, and her students will be reading about Herodotus while they're reading Antigone for me in my other class. So it's nice. She will use elements of the traditional textbook, but largely both of us use primary source material. And then I think Deirdre, yeah, very good question. Are students getting credit as authors? Yes. So the main page, and I'll be curious if others have thoughts about this, but the main sort of landing page for the course explains in the editor's note who we are, that we are not faculty, right? That we are undergraduate students at St. Mary's College enrolled in this course. It names then the student researchers who've taken a primary role in doing the editing and the kind of secondary writing. And then within each section at the bottom in each book, it will list all of the students who contributed to that section. So this, and this was a huge benefit for the students. So, I've been trickling this assignment in over almost 3 years, and across the board, they are really drawn to what they call the real world element of this, right? Like that it matters that they are reading this content because they're not simply producing a real world thing, which is a critical addition, but that they are doing so with a particular audience in mind. And that audience is other students. So that we're very clear about the voice, right? That we're not using jargon. We're not talking up here. We are taking complex ideas and we are making, we're putting our effort into making sure that those are translatable and understandable to wide audiences. And we've talked about, on the one hand, our audience is undergraduate students, but it's also anyone, right? Anyone who has an interest in this material. And that is one of the things that I find really exciting. Certainly high school students, my colleague was a high school teacher. And so a lot of her work is actually creating lesson plans and other material reading guides that high school teachers can use with their students. But they, our students have shown their parents and their siblings and just kind of sent this out that way to get, I suppose, their applause.
I have a question for. Oh,
Go ahead, Bill.
I have a question for both of them. I'm trying to find Crystal, but is she still here, or is? There you are. You're in the lower left-hand corner. But this applies to both of you. What are the responses that you're getting from your colleagues? So Laura already mentioned one colleague in order to come and help and move it forward. Crystal's from a campus that's one of our LibreNet members, as is St. Mary's. So I'm just wondering about how their efforts are received by local administration, by your department or your dean. How much resistance or support are you getting in order to move this thing forward outside of the LibreTexts project, that is?
I can jump in. Yeah, I'm sorry. Does Crystal want to jump in? I can't.
Go
One of the
ahead.
attractions of just seeing a name. Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, I'll just say there's been zero resistance. If anything, curiosity. And concretely, we have a huge interdisciplinary team: math, chemistry, modern languages, gender and women's studies, many different programs, English. And one of the most significant moments on campus was right before COVID. I think it was our January faculty development day. We all did a presentation to the entire faculty on what we were doing, and people were blown away and wanting to kind of get involved and just thinking it was, tremendously exciting. And again, the irony of then being forced online within 6 weeks time after that. And in fact, Jesselyn Bird, my colleague, said, thank goodness, because she put her entire course on LibreTexts. She taught ancient literature. So the entire thing was online, which worked out really well because her students had zero cost for that course. And the transition to the online environment was seamless.
The same here. HAC has been very supportive of the administration. We have the OER committee, and we actually give little presentations throughout the year to encourage other faculty to participate. My department chair has been totally supportive, and even as I'm an adjunct faculty member, so I'm not full-time, but he still is encouraging to adjunct faculty as well to participate. And so I think it's just growing at HAC. More and more faculty are interested in doing their own OER projects.
That's great. You didn't mention that you're currently working on the archaeology book, did you? I didn't catch that.
Oh, no, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I'm currently working on an introduction to archaeology. I'm using a existing OER that was, I forget their names, but they're from an institution out in California. But of course, I need to add and modify it a bit just to fit with Pennsylvania archaeology and things. So I'm currently halfway through it. I'm hoping to get it done in the next couple of weeks, but it's a lot of work.
So you estimated in your previous Anthro book that it was about 15 to 20% that you filled in gaps and modified. Is that roughly the same for your archaeology book?
For the archaeology, it's going to be a little more because there were parts that are in our learning objectives in HAC's course description that I have to make sure that I'm addressing, and just I felt they didn't go deep enough in certain areas, so I'm just adding content. So that's why it's taking me a little longer on this one, is I'm doing a lot of editing or writing, composing original stuff.
Great, thank you.
Tressa, did you have a question? I noticed you had turned your video on a minute ago. I didn't know if that's because you were preparing to ask a question. Maybe not. Sorry. Any other questions? We have time for one more, maybe. Oh, Frank just put one in the chat. Oh, about generating new material. Maybe Crystal, since you're generating your own material, maybe you want to take this one.
I actually do my editing right in the LibreText editor. I find, the tools there are pretty similar to any other editor you're using, plus the fact that they have their pre-formatted, like your heading styles and everything are right there. And that way, when you cut and paste, you don't, because a lot of times if you're cutting and pasting from Word or Google, you get that formatting, the HTML formatting behind that document, and it totally messes everything up, and you end up having to go into the editor and look at the HTML and removing tags. And it's just for me, I find it much simpler just to use the editor within LibreText.
Great, thank you. All right, so I have a couple of notes here before we actually move to the break, even though that's the next thing on our agenda. So first note is, when we have breaks throughout this whole meeting like this, please stay logged in if you can. So if you're going to step away from the computer, that's great. If you want to pause your video or whatever, that's fine. But please keep yourself logged in. We're going to start pre-populating breakout rooms for the hands-on sessions that will be happening a little later this afternoon. If you log out, we can't put you into a breakout room. So that just makes our job a little harder. So